treaties. Okay, so the fate of the Seminole Indians. Well, the failure of the Seminole Indians to sign these relocation agreements led to a war between the Seminole Indians and the military. Led to a war, which was known in history as the Seminole War. And this was basically a war between the American military and those Seminole Indians who still refused to sign the removal treaty. And this Seminole War lasted until 1842, when the Seminoles were finally defeated by the American military. So this Seminole War between the American military and the Seminole Indians who refused to sign the relocation treaty lasted clear until 1842. And after their defeat in the Seminole War, the Seminoles peacefully moved westward. The ones that survived the war peacefully moved westward. Now some chose to do what? What's that?
Fight again?
No, not fight, but rather than go west, what did they do? No, didn't join the whites. What? Well, kind of. What they did is they fled. They ran away and escaped. And guess where they hid? In Florida. The Florida Everglades. Okay? Florida State comes from what town in Florida? Anybody know where Florida State University is? It's in Tallahassee, which is close to the Everglades. That's why they call the Florida State Seminoles the Florida State Seminoles, because those were a few band of Seminole Indians who refused to go west, ran away, got away without being caught, settled in the Florida Everglades, and there are still Seminole Indians in that area today. So that's what happened to the Seminole Indians. They were defeated in the Seminole War by the American military. The ones that survived peacefully moved westward into Indian lands. The ones that escaped and ran and hid in the Florida Everglades continued to stay there, build their community, and their descendants still live there today. Okay? All right, that'll take us out of the Indian situation and move us into our next subtopic, which is President Jackson opposes the Bank of the United States. Remember the old Bank of the United States? It was set up by who? Remember who set it up way back?
Alexander.
Very good, Alexander Hamilton. And Andrew Jackson cannot stand the Bank of the United States. One of the most bitter fights during his presidency was against the Bank of the United States. Now, how did the Bank of the United States get established? What branch of government made the Bank of the United States?
Treasury.
Well, but
Taxes.
yeah, but the Treasury recommended, but who actually passed it? Congress. Very good. Congress did. So this bank has a charter. I mean, in other words, every so many years, Congress has to re-up the charter. So just keep that in mind when we talk about this. So one of President Jackson's most bitter fights during his presidency was against the Bank of the United States. And there were reasons why he did not like the Bank of the United States. And I'm going to give you some reasons why he attacked the bank. Anybody know why? Why might you not like something? Why? I'm an old guy, I've been teaching a long time. Why don't I maybe like one of the new methods of teaching called Kagan? We're going to put you in groups by the color of your eyes or what shirts you're wearing, and we're going to make you work together in groups. That's kind of a newfangled thing they're trying to get us to do. Why am I opposed to that? Why am I opposed to that?
Kind of one-sided.
Well, what might I not really? I don't really. What? No. Well, maybe, but we'll get that later. But what? I might not like it because I really don't want it. Understand it. So one of the reasons why Andrew Jackson attacked the Bank of the United States is he did not understand the banking system. Didn't get it. Sometimes when people don't understand things, they just assume get rid of it. I think older people and computers are like that. A lot of older people don't have cell phones and computers because they don't understand them. They just get rid of them. Yeah.
So, wait, they want you to put us in groups by like
Oh, we'll talk about that later. No, I was being a little sarcastic. Why might be another reason that I may not want to do something? Maybe I don't blank it. Like it, or maybe even more, what? No, T word. Maybe I don't trust it. Very good. Jackson, you're all right. Jackson both disliked banks and distrusted banks. So you're exactly right, people that spoke up. So another reason why he wanted to get rid of the Bank of the United States is he didn't trust them and he didn't like them. And he didn't understand them, actually, because he didn't understand the banking system. Another reason that he was against the Bank of the United States is he saw it as a monopoly for the rich and powerful. What's a monopoly? Anybody know?
It's like where you own.
Well, not so much where you own, but, well, kind of. And if we have one hardware store in town, and I've got to credit Mr. Kennedy, because I don't think he does this. We have one hardware store in town right now. He could jack the prices up so high that you would have no choice to pay it if you want. If you needed some bolts and nuts or a wrench on a Sunday or a Saturday, you're not going to run to Billings and get it. You're going to go down there. And he could really jack that price up. If he jacked those prices up, he would be running a monopoly where he's just a game to become more rich and powerful. Well, Jackson saw that the Bank of the United States was a monopoly for the rich and powerful. They used it to their own advantage. Now, what would be a way to figure out if the bank was helping all people? You'd look at the number of people that are what in the bank? What?
Depositors.
No? Who? What's
I
that?
said that, depositors.
Well, not depositors, although that might be true. Who? How does a bank work? Does a bank just come out of nowhere? What do you have to make a bank established? You have to have stockholders, right? People that invest in the bank, right? What do you think most of the stockholders were in the Bank of the United States? Rich or poor? Well, let's not even say rich or poor, because if you're poor, you really can't. There were people. The majority of the stockholders in the bank were wealthy people from the East. Only a few, and there wasn't a lot, but only a few wealthy people that were considered living west of the Appalachians on the frontier were stockholders. So most of the stockholders in the Bank of the United States were rich, wealthy people from the East who Jackson did not like at all. He liked the commoner. So he was upset at the Bank of the United States because his point is, most of the stockholders in this bank are all rich and wealthy people from the East. Only a few people that live west of the Appalachians have stock. So who's going to benefit from the Bank of the United States? Rich Easterners. Okay? So he felt that the only people getting rich and powerful on the Bank of the United States were the people that had money involved from the East.
Or who were going to afford to buy the stock.
That's right. And he didn't like that. Okay? Now, he also thought that those stockholders in the Bank of the United States would lend money to members of Congress in exchange for what? Or favors. I'll lend you this money, but when I need this new railroad coming through my land that I can make some good money on, I want you to support that legislation. And Jackson hated he hated politics. Remember I said he wasn't a politician? He hated that you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours mentality. He thought that those stockholders in the Bank of the United States were simply lending money to Congress in exchange for Congress passing laws that would help them. Okay? So let's go through this again. Here's some reasons why he attacked the Bank of the United States. He disliked banks. He distrusted banks. He didn't understand banks. He saw the Bank of the United States as a monopoly that would benefit the rich and powerful. He accused the bank of lending money to Congress in exchange for political favors. And finally, he saw the Bank of the United States as unconstitutional. Unconstitutional. So he hated the banks. Distrusted them, didn't like them, didn't understand them, thought they were a monopoly to make the rich and powerful more rich and powerful. He thought they lent money to congressmen in exchange for political favors, and he also believed strongly that it was an unconstitutional organization. So he did not have any interest in it, and he opposed it. Well, what was coming up in the summer of 1832? No, not election. This charter, this bank's lease was coming back up. And who decides whether they get it again? Congress does. So as Jackson assaulted the bank applied to renew the lease so they could still be the Bank of the United States. And that was required every 4 years. And Congress had to approve that. And it passed. They approved it through both the House and the Senate. Jackson vetoed the bill. Does that mean it doesn't go through if the president says no? No, it still goes through, but it's marked that the president doesn't support it. So this new charter, or this new lease, to have this bank in effect for another 4 years, it goes to Congress. Both the House and the Senate passed for the Bank of the United States to have 4 more years. Jackson vetoed the bill, but it still passes. So it's going to be a major issue in the upcoming election of 1832. That's going to become a major political issue. And that will be our next subtopic, which is the election of 1832. Yep.
Can you explain to me about this charter?
Okay, so it's kind of like if you're going to sign a lease to run your cows on somebody's land, you rent the, don't you, when you sign the lease, you rent the land from them, you put your cows on it, you make some money. What basically happens here is Congress gives the Bank of the United States another 4 years to run, okay, and to exist, to have a business, okay? In other words, if they didn't renew the lease, they couldn't put their cows in the bank, you see what I'm saying? So every 4 years they did that to make sure that there was no monopoly, that the bank wasn't, you know, doing things wrong, because if they were doing things wrong, Congress could cut them off. Well, Congress didn't believe the same as Jackson, so they gave him a lease for another 4 years. 4 more years, they're going to have to try for that lease again, and that's what I mean by Jackson's going to make that a major campaign issue in 1832. Okay? Now, this is kind of an interesting election, because guess who the Republicans nominated for president in 1832, who did not follow suit by becoming president when he was named Secretary of State by President Adams, Jackson? Henry Clay. So Henry Clay is going to be the candidate for president in 1832. The man that will run with him for the vice presidency will be John Sargent, who is on your ID sheet. John Sargent. Okay? John Sargent will be the vice presidential running mate with Henry Clay. Now, who are the Democrats going to run for re-election? Andrew Jackson. And his running mate will be Martin Van Buren. So for the Republicans, it'll be Henry Clay for president, John Sargent for vice president. For the Democrats, it'll be Jackson for re-election for the Democratic Party, and Martin Van Buren will be the vice presidential candidate. Now, Clay's going to campaign in favor of the Bank of the United States. Jackson's going to campaign in opposition to the Bank of the United States. In other words, Martin Van Buren makes it clear he supports it. Jackson continues his opposition. Or what did I say? Yeah, I'm sorry. Henry Clay will campaign in favor of the Bank of the United States. Jackson will continue his opposition. Now, who voted in this election? What type of people? Common, well, but the common people are voting, okay? And because of that, there are 268 electoral votes possible. No presidential candidate's going to win them all. 268. What do you got to win to be president? 2/3 majority. Jackson wins 219 of the 268. He kicks Henry Clay's rear. Can you imagine how satisfying that was for him, William? He's so doggone mad at Henry Clay, and then Henry Clay ends up running against him, and he crushes it. 219 of the 268 electoral votes possible, Jackson wins.
A lot of people must not like the thing.
Well, the common people like Jackson. If he didn't like the bank, they didn't like the bank. Really, that's true. Now, this is really going to affect the Republican Party in the upcoming election of 1840. Okay, really going to affect them adversely in the election of 1840 because they get their butts kicked in this election big time. Henry, I just crack up. I bet Jackson was just so happy. I bet he was just snickering as he crushed Henry Clay in this election. Crushed him. All right, well that'll take us then to our next subtopic, which is destroying the Bank of the United States. Destroying the Bank of the United States. Yeah, it'll be the National Bank. What's happening?
Mr. Lewis, keep the same.
Oh, one shot. Well, did you bring a pass for me?
How are you doing this one?
Okay, well, would you mind going and getting one from me?
Yeah.
Okay, destroying the Bank of the United States. Now, once he was re-elected, Jackson's main mission in life was to destroy the Bank of the United States. He didn't want any more part of this bank. How would you destroy a bank? How would you make Pinnacle Bank go bankrupt? What would be the best way for that bank to go bankrupt?
Bring another bank.
Well, and if you brought it, okay, that's a good point. We don't have another national bank, but bringing in another bank would have possibility of people doing. What's your point? If you brought in a bank, why would that make Pinnacle Bank bankrupt?
They would lose business.
Why?
Because other people might want to go to the bank.
They might put their money in other banks. Well, whose money's in the national bank? No, the government's, right? Then what's the national bank set up for? For tax money. So the government has, I'm not saying there's not other money in the bank, but the biggest percentage of the money in the Bank of the United States is what money? The government. So what does Jackson do? He gradually withdraws the federal government's money out of the national bank, knowing that when he takes all this money out, what's going to happen? Well, they're not going to have any depositors. Now, where's he going to put this money? He's going to put them in pet banks, is what they called them. Banks that were all across the country that were what? Loyal to him. Loyal to him. So what Jackson does to destroy the national bank is he takes all of the money gradually, not all at once, make it hurt a little bit. He gradually takes all the federal monies out of the National Bank of the United States and starts depositing that money into pet banks that were all across the different states that were loyal to him. Well, after he took all the federal government's money out of there, the bank wasn't able to function. So what was coming up in that 4 years? The lease or the charter. So if you go ask for a charter to continue on and you're stinking it up because you got, you're going bankrupt, you got no money, what is Congress going to do? And that's what they did. So when he took the money out and put it in this pet banks, and the Bank of the United States was not able to function, when they went back to have their lease renewed by Congress, Congress said no. And it was forced to close in 1836. You part of the Lewis problem? Yeah, go back and get a pass from him. I'm going to make him put it in writing that he kept you out of my class. Then you know what's going to hit the fan. So hey, I want proof that he kept you out of my class.
Sound good.
Okay. So after the 4-year lease ended, it was not renewed by Congress. And as a result, the Bank of the United States was forced to close in 1836. Mission accomplished. Andrew Jackson. Yep. Now, I don't know if it was good or bad for the country, but he got her done. Okay, that'll take us to the election of 1836. 1836. 1836, yeah. So what was this whole mission from 1832 to 1830? Did I miss one? Oh, geez, did I miss that?
Hey, you forgot that Richard Warren.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought, I grabbed one. No, wait a minute. Maybe wait a minute. No. I did skip the assessment, I just got too ahead of myself with it. An assassination attempt.
That's our next one.
That's our next one. Just kind of slipped over. An assassination attempt.
On Richard, or was Richard Warren
Richard
being
Lawrence was
tried?
a
Oh, is
You
that-
kind of remember that,
Is
yeah.
this the guy that got beat with
Yeah.
the cane?
Yeah.
So, on January 30th of 1835, President Jackson was visiting the nation's Capitol building. He was at the Capitol. And I think you remember this kind of from the video. A deranged, or maybe better name for that would be crazy, a crazy or deranged house painter, a guy that painted houses, by the name of Richard Lawrence, approached the president, pointed his pistol at the president, and fired. On January 30th of 1835, President Jackson was visiting the Capitol building. A deranged house painter by the name of Richard Lawrence approached the president, pointed his pistol, and fired. What happened? You remember from the video?
Yeah, with the cane.
Not yet. His gun misfired. So what did he do?
Pulled out a second one.
Pulled out a second pistol, pointed it at Jackson, and it
Misfired.
misfired. Bad assassin. This guy's not very good.
His guns misfired because
Yeah.
of the weapon.
I think
Well, whatever. I mean, if you're gonna shoot the president, you better have your stuff together. But anyway, and this is true, we mentioned, and Jackson was so angry with this assassination attempt by Richard Lawrence, he went after him with his cane and had to be restrained by members of his staff. And that's just the way Andrew Jackson was. So picture that in your mind. Richard Lawrence approaches the president, points a pistol at him, misfires. Pulls out another pistol, points it at Jackson, misfires. Jackson is so angry, he pulls out his cane